You know what nobody talks about at the dinner table? What happens to your wealth when you're gone? It's uncomfortable. It's morbid. So we avoid it. And that avoidance? It's costing American families billions every single year. Because while you're busy building your nest egg, there's a silent wealth destroyer lurking in the shadows. It's called probate, and it's about to eat 3% to 7% of everything you've worked your entire life to accumulate. Your kids won't see that money for 9 to 18 months, maybe longer. And during that time, lawyers and courts will be picking through your life's work like vultures at a carcass. But here's what's fascinating. There's one asset class that bypasses this entire nightmare. Completely, legally. And it's the same asset that central banks have been hoarding at record levels for the past 3 years. I'm talking about physical gold, but not the way most people think about it. Let me show you something that happened to a family in Arizona last year. Real people, real situation. The father, let's call him Robert, spent 40 years building a successful contracting business, sold it in 2019 for $2.3 million. Smart guy. Diversified into stocks, bonds, real estate, had a will. Had everything properly set up, according to his estate attorney. Robert passed away in March 2023. And you know what happened? His family got absolutely destroyed by the probate process. The estate was frozen for 14 months. His daughter needed $80,000 to keep her business afloat during COVID recovery. Couldn't touch a dime of her inheritance. The legal fees? $127,000. Court costs and executor fees? Another $43,000. Total probate costs ate up $170,000 of a $2.3 million estate. But here's the kicker. Robert had $340,000 in physical gold stored in a private vault. That gold never touched probate. His beneficiaries accessed it within 72 hours of his death. Zero legal fees, zero court involvement, zero waiting period. Why? Because physical gold held in certain structures operates outside the probate system entirely. It's not a loophole. It's not a trick. It's simply how the asset class functions when structured correctly. Now, most estate attorneys won't tell you this. You know why? Because they make their living off probate. It's a $3 billion industry. They have zero incentive to show you how to avoid their services. Let me break down what actually happens during probate, because most people have no idea what they're signing their families up for. When you die, your will goes to probate court. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. First, the court has to validate the will. That takes 3 to 6 months minimum. During this time, all your assets are frozen. Your spouse can't access your bank accounts. Your kids can't sell your stocks. Everything stops. Then comes the creditor notification period. By law, the court must publish notices giving any potential creditors 4 to 6 months to come forward with claims against your estate. Old business partners, former employees, anyone who thinks you owed them money gets a shot at your wealth before your family sees a penny. After that, the executor has to inventory every single asset, every bank account, every stock certificate, every piece of real estate, every collectible. Everything gets appraised, documented, and reported to the court. This process alone can take 6 to 9 months for a complex estate. Then the executor pays all debts and taxes. Then they distribute assets according to the will. Then they file a final accounting with the court. Then the court reviews it. Then finally, maybe, your family gets what's left. The average probate process in America takes 16 months. In California, 24 months. In Florida, 18 months. And every single day that ticks by, your family is paying legal fees, court costs, and executor fees. But physical gold held in the right structure? It never enters this system. It passes directly to beneficiaries through what's called transfer on death, or beneficiary designation. Same mechanism that life insurance uses. Same mechanism that retirement accounts use. The difference? Gold doesn't have the restrictions and penalties that retirement accounts carry, and it doesn't have the premium costs and limitations that life insurance has. Now, I need to pause here for a second because if you're sitting on $100,000 or more in retirement savings, there's something you should know. You can actually hold physical gold inside your IRA or 401k through what's called a gold IRA. I put together a free guide that explains exactly how this works, how to do it without tax penalties, and how it fits into estate planning. It's in the description below. Worth checking out if that's relevant to your situation. All right, back to why this matters right now more than ever. Because we're not just talking about avoiding probate fees. We're talking about preserving wealth during the largest wealth transfer in human history. Over the next 20 years, baby boomers are going to pass down $84 trillion to the next generation. That's trillion with a T. And here's what's terrifying. Most of that wealth is sitting in assets that are going to get absolutely hammered by probate, taxes, and inflation during the transfer process. Think about it. Your parents' house that they bought for $80,000 in 1985? It's worth $650,000 today. Sounds great, right? Except when they die, that house goes into probate. It sits on the market for 18 months while the estate gets settled. During that time, the market shifts. Property taxes keep accruing. Insurance keeps running. Maintenance costs pile up. By the time your family can actually sell it, you've lost $40,000 to $60,000 in holding costs and market timing. Their stock portfolio? Same problem. Frozen during probate. Can't rebalance. Can't sell during market peaks. Can't buy during dips. You're just stuck watching the value fluctuate while lawyers argue over paperwork. But gold moves immediately. And here's why that matters in today's environment. We're watching the global monetary system undergo its biggest transformation since 1971. That's not hyperbole. That's what's actually happening right now in real time, while most Americans are completely oblivious. Central banks bought 1,037 tons of gold in 2023. That's the second highest annual purchase in history. They bought another 1,045 tons in 2024. China alone added 225 tons to its reserves in the past 18 months. Poland bought 130 tons. Singapore bought 76 tons. India bought 64 tons. These aren't small countries hedging against uncertainty. These are major economic powers fundamentally restructuring their reserve assets. They're moving away from dollar-denominated assets and into physical gold. Why? Because they see what's coming. They see $34 trillion in U.S. debt. They see $2 trillion annual deficits. They see a Federal Reserve that's trapped between inflation and recession. And they're protecting their wealth the same way wealthy families have protected wealth for 5,000 years, with gold. But here's what makes this moment different from every other gold bull market in history. This time, the wealthy aren't just buying gold as an investment. They're restructuring their entire estate plans around it. I was talking to a wealth manager in Connecticut last month. He manages $840 million for 47 families. Old money. Generational wealth. And he told me something fascinating. In the past 2 years, 31 of his 47 clients have moved at least 15% of their estates into physical gold, held in private vaults with beneficiary designations. These aren't gold bugs. These aren't conspiracy theorists. These are families that have preserved wealth through the Great Depression, World War II, the 1970s inflation crisis, the 2008 financial collapse, and COVID. They know something that most Americans don't. They know that the biggest threat to generational wealth isn't market crashes, it's the transfer process itself. Because here's what happens in a typical estate. Let's say your parents have $1.5 million in assets. Sounds like a lot, right? Here's how it actually breaks down when they're gone. First, probate takes 5% to 7%. That's $75,000 to $105,000 gone immediately. Then estate taxes kick in if the estate is over the federal exemption limit. Then state estate taxes in 17 states. Then capital gains taxes on appreciated assets when beneficiaries sell them. By the time the dust settles, a $1.5 million estate might deliver $900,000 to $1.1 million to the next generation. You just lost $400,000 to $600,000 to the transfer process. But if $500,000 of that estate was in physical gold with proper beneficiary designations, that $500,000 bypasses probate entirely. Transfers in days, not months. No legal fees, no court costs, no executor fees. And here's the part that really matters, that gold holds its value during the transfer period. While stocks fluctuate and real estate sits frozen, gold maintains its purchasing power. Actually, in most estate situations, gold appreciates during the transfer period because the transfer period coincides with family financial stress, which coincides with market uncertainty, which drives gold prices up. I saw this play out in real time during COVID. Families that had gold in their estate plans accessed that gold in March and April 2020 when gold was trading at $1,600 to $1,700 per ounce. By the time their other assets cleared probate in late 2020 and early 2021, gold was at $1,900 to $2,000 per ounce. They got liquidity when they needed it, and they got it at a discount to where it ended up. Now, Here's where this gets really interesting from a wealth preservation standpoint. Physical gold held in a vault with beneficiary designations isn't just avoiding probate, it's also providing privacy. When your estate goes through probate, it becomes public record. Anyone can look up what you owned, what it was worth, who inherited it, and how much they got. That's how scammers target grieving families. That's how distant relatives come out of the woodwork with claims. That's how predatory lenders identify vulnerable heirs. But gold held outside probate? Private. Completely private. No public record. No court filings. No newspaper notices. Just a quiet transfer from one generation to the next. This is why ultra-wealthy families have used gold for estate planning for centuries. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Morgans. They all held significant portions of their wealth in physical gold specifically because it transferred privately and efficiently. And now, for the first time in modern history, this strategy is accessible to regular Americans. You don't need $100 million to set this up. You can structure a gold-based estate plan with $50,000, with $100,000, with $250,000. The mechanics are simple. You buy physical gold. You store it in a secure vault with a reputable company. You designate beneficiaries. Done. When you die, those beneficiaries present a death certificate and ID, and they take possession of the gold. No lawyers, no courts, no waiting. But here's what most people miss. This isn't just about estate planning. This is about wealth preservation during the most dangerous monetary period in modern history. Because while you're worried about probate fees, there's a much bigger threat to your wealth. Currency debasement. The US dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1913. That's not a typo. What cost $1 in 1913 costs $31.02 today. Your grandparents' generation could buy a house for $8,000. Today, that same house costs $420,000. The house didn't change, the currency did. And this process is accelerating. The dollar lost 20% of its purchasing power in just the past 4 years. 4 years. That's the fastest debasement since the 1970s. You know what didn't lose purchasing power? Gold. An ounce of gold bought a nice men's suit in 1920. An ounce of gold buys a nice men's suit today. Same purchasing power. Same wealth preservation. This is why central banks are buying gold at record levels. They're not speculating. They're not trading. They're preserving purchasing power across generations. And this is why wealthy families are restructuring their estates around gold. Because they understand that the biggest risk isn't market volatility, it's currency debasement during the wealth transfer period. Think about what happens in a typical estate. Your parents die. Their assets go into probate. 18 months later, you inherit. But during those 18 months, inflation ran at 4% to 6%. You just lost 6% to 9% of your inheritance's purchasing power on top of the 5% to 7% you lost to probate fees. A $1 million inheritance becomes $850,000 after probate. Then inflation eats another $60,000 during the transfer period. You're down to $790,000. You just lost 21% of your inheritance before you even took possession. But gold? Gold appreciates during inflationary periods. It's not losing purchasing power during the transfer. It's gaining it. This is the secret that wealthy families have known forever. You don't preserve wealth by holding currency. You preserve wealth by holding assets that maintain purchasing power across time. And the only asset that has maintained purchasing power for 5,000 years is gold. Now I know what some of you are thinking, but gold doesn't pay dividends. It doesn't generate income. It just sits there. You're right. Gold doesn't pay dividends. You know what else doesn't pay dividends? The $170,000 your family just paid in probate fees. The $60,000 they lost to inflation during the transfer period. The $40,000 they lost in holding costs on real estate that couldn't be sold. Gold's dividend is what it doesn't lose. It doesn't lose value to probate. It doesn't lose value to inflation. It doesn't lose value to currency debasement. It doesn't lose value to court costs and legal fees. And in an estate planning context, that's the most valuable dividend of all. Because here's the reality. Your family doesn't need income from your estate during the transfer period. They need liquidity. They need access. They need assets that can move quickly without legal entanglements. Gold provides all three. I watched this play out with a family in Texas last year. The father died unexpectedly at 68. Heart attack. No warning. He had a $1.8 million estate, $600,000 in stocks, $900,000 in real estate, $300,000 in physical gold stored in a private vault. The stocks and real estate went into probate, frozen for 16 months. During that time, his widow needed $120,000 for medical bills and living expenses. She couldn't touch the stocks, couldn't sell the real estate, but she could access the gold. She took possession of $120,000 worth of gold within 5 days of his death, sold it to a dealer for spot price minus 2%, had cash in her account within 48 hours. No probate, no legal fees, no waiting. The remaining $180,000 in gold? She kept it. And by the time the rest of the estate cleared probate 16 months later, that gold had appreciated from $1,850 per ounce to $2,340 per ounce. She gained $47,000 in value while waiting for the rest of the estate to clear. This is the power of gold in estate planning. It's not just about avoiding probate. It's about maintaining liquidity, preserving purchasing power, and giving your family options during the most stressful time of their lives. And here's what's crazy. Most estate attorneys have no idea how to structure this. They're trained in wills, trusts, and probate law. They're not trained in alternative assets. They're not trained in precious metals. They're not trained in vault storage and beneficiary designations. So they default to what they know. Revocable living trusts, pour-over wills, testamentary trusts, all of which still require probate for certain assets, all of which still involve court supervision, all of which still generate legal fees. But a properly structured gold holding with beneficiary designations, it bypasses all of that. And it's completely legal, completely legitimate, completely enforceable. The key is working with a reputable vault storage company that understands estate planning. Not all of them do. Some are just focused on storage. But the good ones have legal teams that specialize in beneficiary designations, transfer on death provisions, and estate planning integration. They'll help you structure the holding correctly. They'll help you designate beneficiaries properly. They'll help you create a seamless transfer process that your family can execute without legal assistance. And this is becoming more important every single day, because we're not just facing normal market conditions. We're facing a complete restructuring of the global monetary system. The BRICS nations just announced they're developing a gold-backed trade currency. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, plus 40 other countries that have expressed interest in joining. These countries represent 45% of global population and 35% of global GDP. They're creating an alternative to the dollar-based system, and they're backing it with gold. What does that mean for American families? It means the dollar's role as the global reserve currency is under threat for the first time since 1944. And when reserve currencies lose their status, they lose value. Fast. Look at what happened to the British pound after World War II. It lost 30% of its value in 18 months when it lost reserve status. The same thing happened to the Dutch guilder in the 1700s, the Spanish real in the 1800s. Every time a reserve currency loses its status, it collapses. And the families that preserve wealth through these transitions, they're the ones holding gold. This is why central banks are buying at record levels. This is why wealthy families are restructuring their estates. This is why you're seeing a fundamental shift in how generational wealth is being preserved. Because the old playbook doesn't work anymore. Stocks are at all-time highs with valuations that make no sense. Real estate is overpriced in most markets. Bonds are paying negative real yields after inflation. Cash is being debased at 4% to 6% per year. There's nowhere to hide except hard assets. And the hardest asset of all is gold. Now here's what you need to understand about timing. This isn't a get-rich-quick strategy. This is a preserve wealth across generations strategy. Gold doesn't double overnight. It doesn't make you a millionaire in 6 months. What it does is maintain purchasing power while everything else loses value. And in an estate planning context, that's exactly what you want. Because your goal isn't to maximize returns. Your goal is to ensure your family receives the full value of what you've built. Not 70% of it after probate and inflation. Not 60% of it after legal fees and taxes. All of it. And the only way to do that is to structure your estate around assets that bypass the wealth destruction system. Physical gold with proper beneficiary designations is the most powerful tool for doing exactly that. So here's what this looks like in practice. Let's say you have a $2 million estate. You restructure it like this. $800,000 in stocks and bonds for growth and income during your lifetime. $600,000 in real estate for stability and appreciation. $600,000 in physical gold with beneficiary designations for estate planning and wealth preservation. When you die, the stocks and real estate go through probate. That's $1.4 million in probate. At 6% probate costs, that's $84,000 in fees. But the $600,000 in gold? It transfers immediately to your beneficiaries. Zero probate costs, zero legal fees, zero waiting period. Your family gets $600,000 in liquidity within days. They can use that to pay estate taxes, cover living expenses, or simply hold it while the rest of the estate clears probate. And because gold maintains its value, they're not losing purchasing power while they wait. This is the estate planning strategy that wealthy families have used for generations. And now it's available to anyone with $50,000 or more in assets. The question isn't whether you should do this. The question is why you haven't done it already. Because every day you wait, you're exposing your family to probate risk, inflation risk, and currency debasement risk. Every day you wait, you're leaving your wealth vulnerable to the system that's designed to extract fees at every step. And every day you wait, you're missing the opportunity to lock in gold at prices that might look cheap in 5 years. Because here's what's coming. The Federal Reserve is trapped. They can't raise rates without crashing the economy. They can't lower rates without reigniting inflation. They're stuck. And when central banks are stuck, they print money. And when they print money, gold goes up. We saw this in the 1970s. Gold went from $35 per ounce in 1971 to $850 per ounce in 1980. That's a 2,329% gain in 9 years. We saw it again from 2000 to 2011. Gold went from $255 per ounce to $1,900 per ounce. That's a 645% gain in 11 years. And we're seeing it now. Gold went from $1,050 per ounce in 2015 to $2,650 per ounce today. That's a 152% gain in 9 years. And we're just getting started. Because this time is different. This time, central banks are buying. This time, BRICS nations are building an alternative system. This time, the dollar's reserve status is under threat. This is the setup for the biggest gold bull market in history. And the families that position themselves now, with gold structured properly for estate planning, are going to preserve more wealth than any generation in modern history. So here's what you need to do. First, calculate how much of your estate should be in gold. A good rule of thumb is 20% to 30% for estate planning purposes. That's enough to provide liquidity and bypass probate, but not so much that you're sacrificing growth from other assets. Second, find a reputable vault storage company that specializes in estate planning. Look for companies that have been around for at least 10 years, that have secure facilities, that have insurance, and that have legal teams that understand beneficiary designations. Third, structure the holding correctly. Make sure the beneficiary designations are clear, legally enforceable, and aligned with your overall estate plan. Work with both the vault company and your estate attorney to ensure everything is coordinated. Fourth, communicate with your family. Make sure your beneficiaries know the gold exists, where it's stored, and how to access it. The last thing you want is for your family to go through probate on everything because they didn't know about the gold. And fifth, review and update regularly. Beneficiary designations need to be updated when family situations change. Births, deaths, divorces, marriages, all of these require updates to your designations. This isn't complicated. This isn't risky. This is simply using the same wealth preservation strategy that wealthy families have used for centuries, adapted for modern estate planning. Your family deserves to inherit the full value of what you've built. Not 70% of it, not 60% of it. All of it. And the only way to ensure that happens is to structure your estate around assets that bypass the wealth destruction system. Physical gold with proper beneficiary designations is the legacy asset that makes that possible. It's the estate planning secret that wealthy families don't talk about. And it's the strategy that's going to preserve more wealth over the next 20 years than any other approach. The wealth transfer is happening. The monetary system is changing. The question is whether your family will be positioned to benefit, or whether they'll be caught in the probate and inflation trap that destroys wealth for millions of families every single year. The choice is yours. But the window is closing. Because once gold breaks $3,000 per ounce, once the BRICS currency launches, once the dollar loses reserve status, it'll be too late to position at reasonable prices. The families that act now are the families that will preserve wealth across generations. The families that wait are the families that will watch their inheritance get destroyed by probate, inflation, and currency debasement. Don't let your life's work become a statistic in the probate system. Structure your estate around the one asset that has preserved wealth for 5,000 years. Your family will thank you for it.